Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest aliens and UFOs video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's continue with chapter 3 from the book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker. This one talking again about close encounters of the third kind. This will be part 2 of that chapter. I've already chronicled some good examples from part 1. This one will continue the type of encounters that involve an experience with an alien or humanoid-like being. So very fascinating stuff. So I'm going to do this part here and then continue with another part afterwards. And as always, I'll give my own thoughts and opinions on this too. It'll be interesting to see if some of these encounters I've already talked about within my channel. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's share the next part here. And this next segment is called Encounter at Valençol. So here's what it states. Timothy Good has described the Valençol case as one of the most thoroughly investigated close encounters on record. It also seems to be one of the first widely publicized encounters with the entities that have come to be known as the Greys, or at least a variation thereof. Maurice Massey, a farmer living near Valençol, Basses Alps, rose early as usual on the morning of July 1st, 1965, and was in lavender field by 5:45 a.m. Some of the plants had recently gone missing. He was working behind a pile of stones when he heard a whistling sound. Looking for the source of the sound, Massey saw an elliptical object on the ground, standing on 6 legs, joined together at the center of the underside. There was an open hatch in the side of the object, through which Massey could see 2 seats arranged back to back. The farmer then spotted what he assumed to be 2 8-year-old boys making off with some lavender plants. Although he had clearly discovered the culprits responsible for his missing plants, Massey wasn't able to do anything about it, since one of the boys pointed a tube-like device at him, which rendered him incapable of movement. Massey told Jacques Vallée that he was not afraid of the boys. In fact, he sensed a friendly curiosity on their part. They were about 4 feet tall and dressed in dark gray-green one-piece suits. Their heads were large and entirely devoid of hair. They had fleshy cheeks, large eyes, and lipless mouths. According to Massey, their facial appearance gave an impression of joviality, and he had the feeling that they were making good-natured fun of him. They communicated with each other by means of deep, gurgling sounds. Presently, the entities returned to their craft through a sliding door that closed like the front part of a wooden file cabinet. Still visible inside the transparent cockpit, they retracted the landing gear and then guided the craft swiftly away. Massey did not regain his ability to move for about 20 minutes and became very frightened. Presently, though, he was able to return home. He noticed that the ground where the craft had stood was soaked with moisture, although it had not been raining. In addition, nothing would grow on the landing site for the next 10 years. A few days after the encounter, Massey's sleep cycle became totally disrupted, as often happens in such cases. Whereas he had hitherto required only 5 or 6 hours of sleep each night, after the encounter he needed 11 or 12 hours sleep and found it difficult to stay awake for longer than 4 hours at a time. This disruption lasted for several months. The case was investigated by Lieutenant Colonel Valnet of the Gendarmerie Matrice Chateau and the mayor and parish priest of Valençol, as well as UFO researchers such as Dr. Jacques Vallée, all concluded that Maurice Massey was telling the truth, as well they might. Massey was a former resistance fighter and was regarded as conscientious and absolutely trustworthy by all who knew him. Next segment is called Visitors from UMMO. In the years since the 1940s, millions of words have been written about the possible nature of UFOs and, by implication, the possible agendas of their pilots, if such exist. It is entirely understandable that such speculations should arise, given the genuinely mysterious nature of the phenomenon. Much has also been written of a cover-up by major governments who allegedly possess a considerable amount of information about the interstellar visitors, including their biology, technology, history, and social structure. And yet, relatively little attention has been given to the ways in which governments might use the idea of an alien presence for their own ends. This is not to imply that there is no alien presence. However, it must be remembered that psychological weapons are among the most powerful in a government's arsenal. The extraterrestrial alien has become one of the most powerful cultural icons of the 20th century, a fact that is surely not lost on those who have a vested interest in controlling our belief patterns. Tales of alleged alien contact can be immensely convoluted affairs, and the controversy surrounding the arrival of explorers from the planet UMMO is no exception. In his remarkable book, Revelations, Alien Contact and Human Deception, which slaughters a number of ufological cows, Jacques Vallée closely examines the UMMO affair and arrives at some sinister conclusions, none of which have anything to do with the genuine arrival of extraterrestrial voyagers. The controversy began in Aluche, a suburb of Madrid, Spain, on February 6, 1966, when a number of witnesses reported the landing of a large circular object. Beneath the disc was a curious symbol. The following year, another object bearing this insignia was seen by several dozen witnesses in another Madrid suburb, San Jose de Valderas. 5 photographs of the UFO were taken by unidentified people who submitted them to the newspaper Informaciones. A few hours after this sighting, an object was seen to land in yet another suburb of Madrid, Santa Monica. In the days following these encounters, a number of metallic cylinders, each bisected by a thin disc, were discovered by local residents. When opened, the cylinders were found to contain pieces of a tough, flexible material embossed with the UMMO symbol. When examined, the material was revealed to be Tedlar, a weather-resistant plastic used by NASA as a protective covering for rockets on the launch pads. The cylinders themselves were analyzed by the Spanish Institute for Space Research. They were 99% nickel, with traces of magnesium, iron, titanium, cobalt, silicium, and aluminum. The UFO photographs were sent for analysis to a space research facility in Toulouse, France. At that time, the facility was preparing a sophisticated reconnaissance satellite for launch from French New Guinea. Although it had been claimed that 2 photographers had taken the photographs independently, analysis revealed that they had in fact come from the same source, a tripod-mounted camera. Digital analysis of the photographs proved that San Jose de Valderas UFO was 8.5 inches in diameter and 10 feet away from the camera. It appeared to be constructed from plastic plates and a cup and was suspended from a piece of string. The respected Spanish researcher Antonio Rivera disputed these findings, drawing attention to the testimony of the many witnesses, including soldiers who saw the objects in flight and on the ground. Jacques Vallée has an ingenious solution suggesting that witnesses really did see UFOs, but that they were man-made, remotely piloted vehicles. The implication here is that a complex and well-planned scheme was afoot, an implication born out of the examination of the UMMO documents. These documents were sent out to UFO investigators from a still unknown source who mailed them from locations all over the world. The information contained in them, which covered diverse subjects from science and sociology to politics, allegedly came from UMMO, a planet of the IUMMA star system, 14.6 light years away. The system is said to be located 12 degrees, 31 minutes of right ascension and 9 degrees, 18 minutes of declination, placing it near the galactic North Pole in a hydrogen-free, highly transparent region of the sky. Valley points out that given this location, IUMMA ought to be visible from Earth as a 5th magnitude star, but it isn't. According to the documents, the star is hidden by absorbing matter, although no such matter has been detected in that area. The information itself was impressive in that it was internally internally consistent and was based on hard science rather than woolly-headed mysticism so common to other contactee cases. According to a French physicist named Dr. Tessier, who examined several of the documents, the mathematical system used by the Umites was base 12, a base being the number that is raised to various powers to generate the principal counting units of a number system, rather than the base 10, which is used on Earth. This and other information suggested that whoever had produced the documents had a scientific education, at least to a degree level. However, Umite technology was not quite as astonishing as might have been hoped. As Jacques Vallée says, it matches the kind of clever extrapolations one finds in any good science fiction novel of the last 40 years. There is an ingenious twist to the construction of the spacecraft used by UMMO, which are self-repairing in case of collision with asteroids, but the very concept of space travel implied in such a technology barely reaches the level of the average Star Trek episode. The UMMO affair contains many sinister elements perhaps more suited to an espionage novel rather than the field of alien contact. In 1955, Spanish investigators were sent a copy of a letter allegedly sent by the UMMO source to the CIA office in Madrid. The letter stated that two Umites, claiming to be Danish doctors, had stayed at the Albacete house of a society lady, Donna Margarita Ruiz de Hiore and Rizino, Marquise of Villante, Baroness of Alcatrali, between 1952 and 1954, during which time they had conducted psychological experiments on a number of domestic animals. In 1971, the CIA received another document from UMMO containing tests for unmasking extraterrestrial beings who live on Earth clandestinely. The same year, W. Rumsey, allegedly a CIA agent, sent out a circular letter to the citizens of Albacete offering $1,000 for information leading to the apprehension of the two Danish doctors. Although the involvement of the CIA might lend an air of authenticity to these strange goings-ons, Vallée reminds us that anyone can write a letter to a government agency, and the UMMO source's attempt to legitimize itself through these means becomes even more ridiculous when one considers how unlikely it would be for an organization like the CIA to canvass ordinary townspeople for information as to the whereabouts of the two Danes. In 1953, Margaret Shelley, daughter of Marquess of Villasante, who lived on the estate, became seriously ill and was examined by the two mysterious doctors. One said her illness was benign, the other said it was probably fatal. After being treated by a number of respected physicians in Madrid, Margaret Shelley died. While her body was awaiting burial, it was mutilated by an unknown person who removed one hand, both eyes, and a tongue. This was done using surgical techniques. These body parts were subsequently found in the Marquise's mansion by the police as a result of a complaint filed against her by her son. There were yet more macabre discoveries to be made on the estate, including the remains of a large number of dogs and cats which had been experimented upon by the Danish doctors. Some of the animals were mummified while others had been eviscerated. Various animal heads were discovered in silver containers in one of the rooms in the house. A criminal suit was investigated against the Marquise and her husband, during which they were examined for a month in a Madrid psychiatric hospital. The examination concluded that they were both of a perfect mental state and were normal in every way. Their butler, Andres Gomes, was also interrogated by the police and later told journalists that the Marquise's ancient mansion contains a large network of underground chambers, which he described as a horrible place. He told how the Marquise would enter this cellar network through a metal trapdoor in her bathroom and would spend many hours there. I don't know what she did there exactly, but she came up as pale as a corpse. An UMMO document distributed in 1969 claimed a connection between the macabre events in Albacete in 1954 and the Umites' mission on Earth. As Vallée states, it is likely that the UMMO source simply wove this 15-year-old scandal into its own elaborate hoax to give it an additional air of authenticity, like the CIA involvement. Of course, the only person who could have shed any light on the true nature of the events at Albacete was Donna Margarita herself, but she died just before the 1969 document was distributed. The UMMO affair is one of the most outlandish and intriguing cases in the history of ufology. Indeed, its elements extend well beyond ufology, entering much darker terrain with its tales of sadistic animal mutilation and a sinister castle holding unspeakable secrets in its cellars. Some researchers have come to the conclusion that the UMMO was initially a sociological experiment based on the idea of a verifiable alien presence on Earth that eventually got out of hand, with a number of unknown individuals using it as a departure point for their own bizarre agendas. There is even a possible link apparently being investigated in France that the origin of UMMO is an intelligence agency in the former Eastern Bloc, which was, and perhaps still is, conducting a program in scientific espionage. According to one of Valley French's colleagues, such a group would thus be in a position to gain access to a lot of grassroots UFO information. And since a number of physicists in Europe and America have become deeply involved with UMMO, would gain a confidential insight into current scientific research ideas in Western laboratories. Next segment is called Bulletproof Goblins. Although in recent years, reported descriptions of alleged alien entities have been dominated by the so-called Greys, short, spiny, large-headed, obsidian-eyed ne'er-do-wells who abduct hapless humans and harvest their sperm and ova for diverse reasons, previous years saw widely different descriptions of everything from entirely human-looking people to smelly hirsute dwarves to eyeless, single-legged pseudo-robots with tentacles for arms. One such sighting occurred at the home of the Sutton family in the tiny community of Kelly, several miles from the town of Hopkinsville, New Kentucky, on the evening of August 21st, 1955. Bill Taylor, a relative of the Suttons who was visiting, went out to get a drink from their well when he noticed a saucer-shaped object descending into the nearby field. A few minutes after he had excitedly returned indoors to tell the Suttons what he had seen, they all saw a small figure approaching the house. The sight must have been truly shocking. The creature was just over 3 feet tall, with a round head and enormous bat-like ears. Its mouth was a wide slit extending from ear to ear. Its arms were long, almost ape-like, and extended in clawed hands. Perhaps most terrifying at all, the creature appeared to be self-luminous, casting an eerie silver glow across the darkened yard. This bizarre visitor was soon joined by several others, which began to wander around outside the house. Some of them climbed a nearby tree and from there dropped on the roof. The terrified Suttons quickly armed themselves with shotguns, which they fired several times at the creatures. Incredibly, they claimed that whenever they hit one of the creatures, the bullets sounded as if they were hitting a bucket, and the creature would then roll over and scurry for cover, completely unharmed. Although they walked upright, the creatures ran on all fours. At one point, Bill Taylor attempted to leave the house and was immediately confronted by one of the creatures, which was sitting on the roof just above the door, and which reached down and grabbed his hair. Needless to say, Taylor decided to go back inside. Interestingly, whenever the creatures approached the house, they would raise their arms in a stick-em-up fashion and would move very slowly. Bud Ledwith, who worked at radio station WHOP in Hopkinsville and conducted an in-depth investigation of the case, suggests that this may have well been a friendly gesture on the part of the creatures, an attempt to let the humans know that they were unarmed and meant them no harm. Of course, when faced with such a creature approaching with its talon hands raised, the average person would be forgiven for placing precisely the opposite interpretation on the gesture. This activity went on for much of the night, with the humans desperately trying to disperse their unwanted guests with flashlight beams and bullets. The creatures were, however, disinclined to leave and continued to wander around the yard and climb nearby trees. Whenever they were caught by a beam or a bullet, they would float gently to the ground rather than jumping or falling, and then scamper for cover. At no time did they attempt to enter the house. Eventually, the situation grew unbearable for the Suttons and Bill Taylor, and they made a frantic dash from the family car and drove into Hopkinsville to report the encounter to the police. Deputy Sheriff George Batts went out to the house, accompanied by 2 Kentucky state policemen, but was unable to find any evidence of the little creatures or their craft. However, Chief of Police Greenwell was impressed with the Suttons' testimony and concluded that something scared these people, something beyond reason, nothing ordinary. Bud Ledwith could find no motive for a hoax. Not only were the Suttons not seeking publicity, they were subsequently harassed by reporters and numerous other curious people to the point where, in common with many other UFO witnesses, they wished the story of the encounter had never emerged. Although he did not officially investigate the case, Dr. Hynek did attempt to find out there had been a traveling circus in the area from which monkeys might have escaped, but as he admitted, if the Suttons were to be believed, the creatures they encountered could not have been monkeys. Assuming that they had hit the creatures for bullets, at least one body should have been discovered. In addition, monkeys either jump or fall from trees. They do not float from them. In the event, Hynek was unable to find any trace of a traveling circus. Then that's it. That's everything for at least this part associated with Close Encounters of the Third Kind from the book UFO Sightings by Alan Baker. Let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, some interesting stuff, no? When it comes to several of these encounters. First one being the encounter at Valensole. There you had a situation where this person encountered one of the graves, one of the infamous graves that I've chronicled within several times in my channel. This story, though, I haven't talked about, at least that I can recall. May have, but I'll have to double check again, but not too many or all of it seems familiar to me. But here you have a situation where he was walking around, this farmer was, and then all of a sudden he saw them. Apparently they were the ones stealing his plants, and then when he tried to confront them, then they pointed a tube-like device at him, which basically paralyzed him. And then he had those strange sleep cycle differences, and then also that tiredness afterward. Interesting stuff. A short story, but I'll have to check again if I talked about that or not. The next one was really bizarre. The visitors from UMMO. I don't quite know what to take of it. Is it a hoax? Is it somebody pretending to be something else? Is it just a weird government fake type of disinformation? I don't know. I didn't quite get that. Somebody might have to explain it to me more. I might have to reread it again and then start something else, try to understand something else on it, because it made it sound like there was several parties. Like it could be the CIA, or it could be some other fake institution, somebody, or it could be a troll, like somebody else just making fun of other people. But they were sending all this information across the world, and when that happened, it was almost with like a cute wink of the eye when it came to it being close to extraterrestrial but clearly man-made, or vice versa. It was weird. It's a weird situation, and I still didn't quite get it, so somebody again might have to post it here. But the other segment, that one I do understand. That's one of my earliest videos, in fact, on the aliens UFO side, the one involving the Hopkinsville goblins. Here you had that situation involving the Sutton family encountering these goblins from hell coming down from a ship and then basically terrorize them throughout the night. I still remember making that video. It has a good number of views too. Check it out if you have a chance. Just type in Hopkinsville goblins on my search, and then you'll be able to bring it up. The one thing that they didn't identify was the slow motion that the creatures walked with, quote unquote walked with. I remember talking about that in the video, how whenever they moved, it was almost like they were moving underwater. Like it was very slow, very purposely slow, but it wasn't mentioned here. But at least it was interesting to see the rest of the points associated with it, including the sound of the bullets hitting them, almost like hitting like a bucket, and then that the creatures were floating down and how they never really came into the house. Interesting stuff. And fascinating too that it looks like the witnesses themselves didn't really want to have anything else to do with the case because of all the unwanted publicity. So, but at least I'm glad that they covered it there. All right, everyone, that's it for this part here. I'll continue the next part afterward. Let me know what your thoughts and comments are too. All right, everybody, thanks again as always. Take care.